Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with a simple but profound idea. When you focus on yourself, everything changes. Not in a narcissistic or self-absorbed way, but in the most responsible and courageous way possible. Because focusing on yourself truly is one of the most difficult and transformative journeys a human being can undertake. Self-awareness is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the foundational act upon which all meaningful transformation is built. Before you can change the world, or even your own circumstances, you must first be able to look in the mirror without flinching. You must come to terms with who you are, not who you wish to be, and not who you pretend to be for the world. The journey inward is the most revolutionary path a person can take, because it dismantles delusion, burns away denial, and clears the fog that covers potential. Self-awareness begins with observation. But not passive observation, active, critical, and often painful observation. You have to ask questions most people avoid. Why do I react that way in conflict? Why do I procrastinate on things that matter? What beliefs am I carrying that are no longer serving me, or worse, harming me? This is not a philosophical exercise. It's psychological surgery. Many people believe that their problems are external, that the world is unfair, that other people are unkind, that circumstances are to blame. And yes, life is hard, but the truth is, we often amplify our own suffering through unconscious patterns, learned helplessness, and repeated self-sabotage. Becoming self-aware is the act of stepping out of the victim narrative and assuming the role of an active participant in your own life. One of the great enemies of self-awareness is distraction. Our modern world offers endless ways to avoid the inner journey. Social media, entertainment, busyness, even noble distractions like helping others. But the person who constantly looks outward will never master what's going on inward. And until your inner world is understood, ordered, and clarified, your outer world will remain in disarray. There's also a misconception that self-awareness is about focusing on your flaws. That's only half the picture. True self-awareness also means recognizing your strengths, your values, your unique tendencies. You may discover that you're more creative than you allowed yourself to believe, or that your quiet temperament is a strength in disguise. It's about owning the full spectrum of who you are. Now here's something important. Self-awareness does not guarantee immediate change. You may understand yourself deeply and still struggle to act differently. That's normal. Insight precedes change. The first step is knowing the wound, the second is healing it, and the third is moving forward with wisdom. But without that first step, without self-awareness, nothing else happens. You'll be repeating cycles, hoping for change and blaming others when it doesn't come. Developing self-awareness requires habits of reflection, journaling, meditation, honest conversation, and most importantly, solitude. You need silence to hear your own voice. You need space to explore your thought patterns. You need time to examine your motivations. And that is why this work is often avoided. It's not easy, but it is essential. Ultimately, the revolution of self-awareness is not just about you. It's about everyone you influence. When you become more aware, you become more conscious of how you speak, how you behave, how you affect others. You become more responsible, more grounded, and more trustworthy. You stop acting out your wounds on others, and that changes everything. So if you want to start transforming your life, don't look outside for the first answer. Look inside, begin the revolution with awareness, begin with honesty, begin with courage, because until you know yourself, you cannot lead yourself. And until you lead yourself, you cannot lead anything else. Discipline is often misunderstood. It is not punishment, rigidity, or the suppression of desire. Rather, discipline is the conscious organization of your behavior around what you value most. It is the act of aligning your actions with your goals, your ideals, and your deeper vision of who you could become. And when you commit to discipline, not just for a day or a week, but as a lifestyle, you begin to shape your identity in a lasting, meaningful way. We live in an age of instant gratification. Everything from food to entertainment to information is available with a few taps. This accessibility has its advantages, but it also breeds impatience and weakness. We forget that anything of value, health, skill, wisdom, relationship, requires consistent, repeated effort over time, and it is through discipline that we build the capacity to sustain that effort. When you act with discipline, you send a powerful message to yourself: I can be trusted. You say you'll wake up early, and you do. You say you'll finish the project, and you follow through. You say you'll limit distractions, and you hold the line. Each time you honor a commitment, you solidify your identity as someone who follows through. This is not about motivation. Motivation comes and goes. Discipline remains when motivation fades. It is the deeper engine that drives progress. Your identity is not a fixed thing. It is something you construct over time through repeated choices. Every disciplined act is a brick in the house of your future self. Skipping the workout, breaking your promises, indulging every impulse. These also shape your identity, but in the wrong direction. If you live without discipline, you become someone you can't even respect, let alone rely on. And that lack of self-respect bleeds into every area of your life. Your work, your relationships, your self-worth. The truth is, discipline requires sacrifice. You must choose between what you want now and what you want most. You must be willing to delay pleasure, endure discomfort, and persist through boredom. But in doing so, you gain something far more valuable than comfort: control. The disciplined person controls their emotions, their time, their attention. They are not tossed around by every temptation or mood. They stand firm, and in doing so become formidable. Let's be clear, discipline is not perfection. You will fail, you will slip, you will fall short. But discipline teaches you to rise again. It teaches you to take responsibility for your failures, to learn from them, and to keep moving forward. A disciplined person is not someone who never breaks. It's someone who keeps rebuilding. Moreover, discipline is not limited to routines. It includes emotional restraint, mental focus, ethical integrity. Can you control your anger? Can you delay your response in an argument? Can you keep showing up even when no one notices? These are all forms of discipline, and each one strengthens the spine of your identity. Eventually, discipline becomes character. It becomes who you are. And when that happens, everything changes. Your confidence grows, not because you're pretending, but because you know you've done the work. Others begin to trust you, not because you seek approval, but because your actions are reliable. You become someone of substance in a world addicted to appearance. In the end, you are what you repeatedly do. If you want to be strong, consistent, and respected, discipline is not optional. It is the pathway. It is the forge, and through it, you do not merely build habits. You build yourself. Comparison is a natural human instinct. From early childhood, we observe others, measure ourselves against them, and use those observations to orient ourselves socially, emotionally, and psychologically. But what begins as a tool for learning can quickly become a trap. When comparison becomes chronic, unconscious, or envy-driven, it doesn't guide us. It destroys us, it steals progress, it warps self-perception. It anchors you to someone else's life rather than helping you live your own. Let's start with this truth: your life is uniquely yours. Your experiences, temperament, values, upbringing, pain, strengths, and vision are unlike anyone else's. To compare your journey to another person's, especially when you don't know what they've endured or sacrificed, is like comparing apples to architecture. It's a false equation, and yet we do it all the time. In the modern world, comparison is more dangerous than ever. Social media has weaponized it. You no longer compare yourself to your immediate environment, your classmates, colleagues, or neighbors. Now, you're comparing yourself to celebrities, billionaires, fitness models, tech prodigies, and influencers who curate their lives for maximum admiration and minimum authenticity. And worse, we compare our behind the scenes to their highlight reels. The cost of this is enormous. Comparison breeds envy, self-doubt, bitterness, and paralysis. You begin to believe that you're too late, too flawed, or too far behind to catch up. You question your worth. You stop trying, or you burn yourself out trying to become someone you're not meant to be. And in doing so, you abandon the one thing you actually can control: your own growth. Here's the hard truth. The only legitimate standard of comparison is who you were yesterday. If you want to measure anything, measure progress. Your progress. Are you more disciplined than last year? More honest, stronger, kinder, more competent? That is what matters. That is what builds self-respect. External comparison is unstable because you can't control anyone else's journey, but internal comparison is empowering because it keeps the focus where it belongs, on you. Now, this does not mean you can't admire others. Admiration is healthy. Role models are important. You can look to others for inspiration, guidance, or proof that certain things are possible. But the key distinction is this: admiration lifts you, comparison diminishes you. Admiration says, if they can do it, maybe I can too. Comparison says, they're better than me, so why even try? One inspires action, the other provokes resentment. Another danger of comparison is that it distorts your vision. You start chasing goals you don't even care about, because others are chasing them. You adopt values that don't align with your soul. You build a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. And when you live like that, you don't just lose yourself. You start to feel like a stranger in your own story. Escaping comparison requires intentional focus. You must decide to become the main character in your own life, not an audience member in someone else's. This means setting goals that are personal, not performative. It means defining success on your own terms. It means tuning out the noise and tuning into your own voice. Most importantly, you must learn to appreciate your own pace. Some people find their purpose early. Others take time. Some succeed quickly. Others build slowly. The timing doesn't matter. The direction does. And if you're focused on becoming just 1% better each day, you're winning. That's how greatness is built, not in a single leap, but in steady, deliberate steps forward. So let go of comparison, not because it's morally wrong, but because it's pragmatically useless. It adds nothing to your life. Focus instead on growth, on effort, on becoming better than who you were. That's where real power lies. That's where your life begins to change. At some point in life, we must all confront a simple but terrifying reality. Much of the world is chaotic. Life is unpredictable, people are fallible, suffering is inevitable, and the outcomes we desire do not always align with our efforts. Faced with this chaos, many people become overwhelmed. They retreat into blame, avoidance, or cynicism. But there is another response, one far more courageous and transformative: responsibility. Responsibility is the act of voluntarily confronting the disorder of life and saying, I will do something about this. It is not about blame, it is not about fault, it is about response. When you take responsibility, you claim authorship over your life. You stop waiting for rescue, you stop expecting the world to fix itself before you act. You begin to organize the chaos, internally and externally, through discipline, clarity, and purpose. Why is responsibility so powerful? Because it is the gateway from helplessness to power. When you refuse responsibility, you become passive. Everything happens to you. You become a victim of your circumstances, a product of your past, a slave to your emotions. But when you accept responsibility, even for things that weren't directly your fault, you reclaim control. You can't always choose what happens, but you can choose how to respond, and that choice is everything. Many people fear responsibility because they associate it with burden. And yes, responsibility is heavy, but it is also meaningful. Without responsibility, life feels hollow. It feels aimless. People who avoid responsibility often fill their lives with distraction, entertainment, and pleasure, but still feel lost. Why? Because we are not made for comfort alone. We are made to carry something. To build, to protect, to contribute, to endure. Without a load to carry, the soul grows weak. This applies to every area of life. In your relationships, responsibility means owning your part in conflict, learning to communicate better, and being emotionally dependable. In your work, it means showing up on time, doing more than you're paid for, and refusing to cut corners. In your personal development, it means facing your habits, your addictions, your thought patterns, and working to improve them, no matter how hard it is. Every act of responsibility is a brick in the foundation of order. When you begin to take responsibility, you notice something remarkable. The chaos around you begins to shrink. Your room becomes cleaner. Your finances become more stable. Your conversations become more honest. Your health begins to improve. It's not magic. It's the natural result of someone choosing to bring order into their domain. And once you've tamed a small area of chaos, you gain the strength to take on more. You start with your room, then your routine, then your relationships, then your broader environment. This is how transformation begins, from the inside out. But responsibility also requires humility. It means accepting that your problems are, at least in part, your own making. It means letting go of the comforting illusion that someone else is to blame, and that's painful, but it's also empowering. Because if you created some of the mess, you can clean it up. You can do better. You can grow. In a world filled with noise, distraction, and dysfunction, the responsible individual stands out. They become a source of strength for others. They bring structure where there was confusion, calm where there was panic, and vision where there was blindness. And they don't do it perfectly, but they do it consistently, and that is what matters. So ask yourself, what chaos have I been avoiding? What area of my life have I left unattended, hoping it would fix itself? That is where your work begins. That is where responsibility is calling you. And if you answer, you will discover something extraordinary. Not only does your world begin to change, but you begin to change. You become someone strong enough to carry the weight, and that strength will serve you and those around you for the rest of your life. There's an often overlooked connection between our internal state and the external world we inhabit. What you see around you, your habits, your space, your relationships, is not separate from what's happening inside of you. In fact, it's a direct reflection. Your environment acts as a mirror, showing you the structure, or lack thereof, of your inner world. And when you focus on changing your inner life, your outer world begins to shift as a result. Think about your physical space. Is your room messy? Are your belongings scattered, your desk cluttered, your routine chaotic? These are not merely signs of laziness. They are signals of something deeper. Disorder in your environment is often a symptom of internal confusion or emotional instability. A disorganized space tends to reflect a disorganized mind. The reason this matters so much is because your environment feeds back into your psychology. When you live in chaos, it becomes difficult to think clearly. It becomes harder to act decisively. Small problems grow in the shadows of your neglect, and your sense of control over your life begins to erode. You start to feel like you're being ruled by life rather than the other way around. The good news is that this connection works in both directions. If your environment reflects your inner world, then improving your surroundings can also help restore internal clarity. This is why something as simple as cleaning your room can feel so deeply satisfying. It's not just about hygiene. It's a symbolic act of reclaiming control. You are saying to yourself, I am capable of creating order out of chaos. And once you begin there, that momentum spreads. But the environment includes more than just your physical space. It also includes the people around you. Who do you spend your time with? Are you surrounded by individuals who challenge you to grow, or by people who keep you trapped in destructive cycles? Your social environment has a profound impact on your self-concept, your emotional state, and even your beliefs about what is possible. If you want to change your life, you need to curate your environment with intention. That means building habits that support your goals. That means arranging your space to promote focus, not distraction. That means distancing yourself from toxic influences and surrounding yourself with individuals who reflect your higher values. This may sound like a lot of effort, and it is, but the alternative is worse. Living passively in an environment that shapes you without your consent. People who do not consciously design their environment are constantly being pulled by forces they do not understand. They become reactive instead of proactive. They drift instead of direct. It is also important to understand that your environment includes your mental inputs, what you watch, what you read, what you listen to. These are forms of psychological nutrition. And just like your body is affected by the food you consume, your mind is affected by the information and entertainment you absorb. If you're feeding your mind garbage, don't be surprised when your thinking becomes cloudy and your mood unstable. So here's a challenge: take an honest inventory of your environment. Walk through your room, your routine, your habits, your social circle, your digital consumption. Ask yourself, does this support who I want to become, or does it anchor me to who I've been trying to outgrow? Be ruthless in your honesty, because until your environment is aligned with your vision, it will always be pulling you backward. Creating a new environment doesn't require perfection. It begins with small acts of responsibility, tidying your space, creating a morning routine, cutting off one negative influence, limiting exposure to junk media. These little changes compound. They send a message to your subconscious: we're heading in a new direction now. And as your environment changes, you'll notice something powerful. Your identity begins to evolve. You stand taller, you think clearer, you behave differently. Because when the world around you is clean, focused, and intentional, it invites you to be the same. We often speak of personal growth as something that happens in motion, in the gym, at work, during collaboration, in the hustle of life. But there's a deeper truth that often goes unrecognized. Real, lasting growth often begins in isolation. Not isolation as loneliness, not as rejection, but as deliberate solitude. The kind of solitude where transformation brews in silence, where a person confronts their true self without distraction or noise. Why does isolation matter? Because it removes the masks. In society, we play roles. We act the part we think others expect of us. At school, at work, on social media, even in relationships. But in isolation, those roles dissolve. You're left with only yourself, your thoughts, your pain, your habits, your fears. It is in this raw encounter that the seeds of growth are planted. It's where clarity emerges, not from the opinions of others, but from your own voice. Isolation forces you to listen, and often what you hear at first is unpleasant. The doubts you've buried under noise rise to the surface. The pain you've avoided finally demands attention. But this is not a curse. It is a doorway. You cannot heal what you refuse to face, and you cannot face it while constantly distracted. Silence is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. In that discomfort lies the opportunity to rewrite the script of your life. Now, this kind of isolation is not about cutting people off or escaping responsibility. It's about withdrawing with intention, to reflect, to study, to reorient, to become stronger. Just like a seed needs to go underground in darkness before it can sprout toward the light, so too must the individual descend inward before rising to their potential. Many people fear solitude because it exposes their unfinished work. Without constant company or stimulation, their anxiety rises. They feel empty. But this discomfort is exactly the point. If you cannot be alone with yourself, something is broken. Growth begins when you stop fearing your own company and start learning from it. Some of the most profound transformations in human history have occurred in solitude. Think of the spiritual seekers, the philosophers, the scientists, the inventors. Many of them entered periods of isolation to think deeply, to build, to create, to discover truth. They weren't running from life, they were preparing to return to it stronger. Isolation gives you time to develop self-discipline. No one is watching, no applause is coming, there's no social reward. But when you do the work anyway, when you study, exercise, write, or reflect in solitude, you strengthen your character, you stop being dependent on external validation. You build an inner standard that is far more durable than the approval of others. It also provides clarity. Without the constant noise of competing opinions, you can finally hear your own. What do you truly want? What are your principles? What kind of person do you intend to become? These questions are hard to answer when your attention is always pulled outward. Solitude helps you realign with your highest vision. Eventually, you return from isolation. You re-enter the world, not as someone who escaped, but as someone renewed. Stronger, quieter, more focused, less reactive. You don't need to prove yourself as much, because you've already proven something far more important. That you can face yourself and survive it. So don't fear isolation. Seek it not endlessly, but regularly. Make room for silence in your day. Walk alone. Reflect deeply. Journal. Disconnect. Do the hard inner work. Because when you emerge from that place, clear, grounded, prepared, you bring something rare into the world. Presence. And presence is power. In the end, growth is not always loud. It's not always visible. Sometimes it happens in a quiet room, with a determined soul and a blank page. Sometimes growth whispers before it roars. And if you listen closely, you'll find that your next breakthrough is waiting. Not out there, but within. There's a common misconception that working on yourself is selfish, that focusing inward is somehow neglecting your responsibility to others or the world. But this could not be further from the truth. When you master yourself, your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your character, you do not become less connected to the world. You become more useful to it. Personal mastery is not an escape from life. It's the preparation for it. And when you elevate yourself, everything and everyone around you begins to rise as well. What is personal mastery? It is the process of refining who you are. It means becoming stronger, sharper, more disciplined, more aware. It's not about perfection. It's about intentional development. It is the lifelong pursuit of becoming someone capable of facing reality with courage and grace. Someone who can withstand pressure without collapsing. Someone who acts with integrity even when no one is watching. This mastery begins with small decisions. You wake up earlier to train your body. You read instead of scrolling. You speak less and listen more. You choose the harder path when it's the right one. You stop making excuses. And slowly, day by day, you become someone different, not just in action, but in identity. You begin to see yourself not as a passive participant in life, but as a person of influence, a force of order, a stabilizing presence in a chaotic world, and the effects don't stay contained. When you grow, the quality of your relationships improves. You become more patient, more present, more reliable. When your thinking becomes clearer, your decisions become sharper, and those around you benefit. You inspire, not by lecturing, but by living as proof that change is possible. Others see your transformation and begin to ask questions about their own potential. In this way, personal mastery becomes generative. It's not selfish, it's service. You cannot give what you do not have. If you are undisciplined, you cannot teach discipline. If you are confused, you cannot offer clarity. If you are reactive, you cannot bring peace. The stronger and more grounded you are, the more capable you are of lifting others. Not with noise, but with presence. This principle also applies to leadership. Whether you are leading a family, a team, or a business, your personal mastery sets the tone. People do not follow words, they follow example. A leader who cannot control themselves will eventually lose control of everything else. But a leader who has mastered themselves, who acts with vision, humility, and strength, creates an environment where excellence can flourish. Mastery also brings resilience. Life is difficult. Challenges will come. You will be tested. But when you've done the inner work, you can remain steady in the storm. You can carry burdens without breaking, face losses without losing hope, and adapt without losing direction. This resilience is not given, it is built, and it's built through effort, consistency, and relentless honesty. But here's the key: mastery is not a destination. It's not something you check off a list. It is a way of being, a commitment to never stop refining, never stop learning, never stop growing. It requires humility, the admission that you don't know everything, that you have blind spots, that you can always become better. And it requires courage, the willingness to confront your weaknesses and take responsibility for your evolution. So if you truly want to help others, start with yourself. If you want to lead, learn to follow discipline. If you want to make the world better, make yourself better. That is not weakness, that is strength, that is not vanity, that is virtue. And when you master who you are, you carry that strength into every room you enter. You speak differently, you live differently, you elevate the atmosphere. In the end, personal mastery is the highest form of service. It is the gift you give the world through who you become. And when you commit to that path, everything changes, not just for you, but for everyone around you.